Hi everyone, today I have the pleasure to introduce Ruth Stokes. Miss Stokes has lived in Queenstown for a decade as of this week, and she's very well accomplished in her career, having held many notable roles in the public sector. She went straight from high school to Auckland University, where she achieved a Bachelor of Commerce in Economics. Then she continued her studies at Victoria University to gain a postgraduate certificate in public management. Miss Stokes has worked in the Auckland City Council and Water Care, and her most influential roles include CEO of Lakes Leisure, QLDC General Manager of Operations, and DCC General Manager of Infrastructure and Networks. Ms. Stokes is our Queenstown Chamber of Commerce Chief Executive, with her role to be a great advocate to the Queenstown business community. So let's give a warm welcome to Ms. Stokes.
Thanks very much, Sophia, and thank you everybody for having me this morning. Look, I really appreciate that you've all gotten out of bed to listen to me, and for some of you to be at school at 8 a.m. I appreciate that that is a huge accomplishment. This morning, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about me, about leadership and why it's important, and the things I have learned along the way. Most of you will know me not as on the basis of the career that Sophia has just outlined, but on the basis of the fact that I am Jacob's mum. Now, little known fact about Jake. Jake, who struggles to be on time today, actually arrived 2 months early when he was born and was just a little over 1,800 grams, so about 3.5 blocks of butter. Jacob's claim to fame in our family is that both he and I nearly died in the following 24 hours. So those of you who know him know he's a bit of a drama queen, and life started dramatically and has gone on from there. But anyway, a bit about me. So I am 48 years old. I have 5 children, including Jacob. I was born in Hamilton City, and I spent my first years there going to primary school and on to high school. I'm married to Anthony, and Anthony actually only lived a couple of 100 metres away from me as the crow flies in Hamilton, but we met at Auckland University after he'd been overseas for 4 years. So there you go, Hamilton has a gravitational pull. We spent almost 20 years in Auckland, where the majority of my career has been, and then we spent 10 years down here, which has been a fantastic opportunity for our children. I have worked predominantly public sector, as Sophia outlined, because I believe in making a difference. You know, I don't get out of bed every day to do an average job. I get out of bed to do a great job. And I get personal satisfaction from seeing things change. And that is one of the big reasons that I took the role at the Chamber of Commerce last year, particularly in a COVID-affected environment where a lot of our businesses were doing it tough. I had my children young, unexpectedly, during university, found out I was pregnant 5 days after I turned 20, and the next day found out I was having a set of twins. So, you know, as they say, life is what happens to you when you're making other plans. But having children hasn't hindered me in developing a career. In fact, it has made me incredibly efficient and effective. As Sophia's outlined, I've held a number of senior roles over the years, and I can tell you that leadership is certainly something that is learned. Leaders are made; they're not born. You do come with a set of prerequisites, such as, you know, you're smart and you're capable and you're driven. But in terms of leading people, that is a whole nother skill set that you need to learn about. So leadership, what is leadership and why is it important? Leadership, as Dwight Eisenhower very famously once said, is the art of getting someone else to do something that needs to be done because they want to do it. So at the heart of that, of course, is people. The idea of leadership and the fact that it actually matters is a relatively new concept. So it's really only gained currency in the last 25 years, which obviously is a lifetime to you guys, but you know, in the scheme of things, it's actually not that long. And to give you an idea of how things change, and we think things are changing quickly now. It was only in the 1970s that women were able to open bank accounts in New Zealand without their brothers or fathers or husbands' permission. In the 1980s and 90s, childbirth was still the leading killer of women in New Zealand. And when I started my professional career, women were not allowed to wear trousers in the office. So things have changed quite dramatically, even in the last 20, 25 years. So leadership is all about that setting direction, about marshalling your resources, including your people and your dollars, and actually getting things done. And it's important to New Zealand more than ever. You may be aware that New Zealanders work more hours a week than most OECD countries, and yet we earn a lot less. In fact, even our highest performing firms in New Zealand earn roughly about 45% less than the highest performing firms overseas. So why does productivity matter? Well, productivity matters to you and to me and to all of us because it's actually about the wealth of our country. It's about the health care that we can afford. You know, we've all seen those stories about the people with cystic fibrosis who need a drug that is not funded. It's that sort of thing that increasing our productivity will make a big difference to. And leadership is core in changing productivity. So productivity is fundamentally changed through innovation and technology. But for innovation and technology to be A, found, B, implemented, C, diffused across our economy, and D, having resources, people and money put towards those higher productivity areas takes leadership. And leadership is about people. And people are the most complicated thing you'll ever come across in your life. But in order to lead them properly, you need to understand who they are and what motivates them. Most of us actually, you know, we don't need too much. We're all pretty similar. We want to do things that are valuable and we want to be valued. And that doesn't mean you have to be the chief executive or the general manager or working in some flash role. It's just as important to put a smile on someone's face, to make someone feel like they're important, even if they're just buying a jersey. That is about leadership. So what have I learned over the years? I have certainly found that my leadership skills have been honed through crisis. And I've dealt with a lot of things. I've dealt with pouring untreated water into a city and having a hospital's water shut down. I've dealt with having to close public facilities, swimming pools, etc., because we were going to lose the roof when the winds went over 100 kilometres an hour. But people ultimately just want three things from you as a leader. They want clarity of direction. They want to know where we're going and what we're going to achieve. They want consistency from you. The hardest thing to do is to work for someone whose emotions are all over the place. Jacob will tell you that I'm a fairly reasonably even character. I don't throw tantrums. I'm not a yeller. But knowing that your leader is going to respond in a particular way, given the situation, actually is what makes you feel safe and makes you be able to do your job or do what it is that you need to do with confidence. So the other part of that is communication. So communication is incredibly important because if you don't talk, then people don't know what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing. But more importantly, they actually don't know that you care. There are lots of colloquialisms out there that people use, and they are cliches mainly because they're true. When you're leading people, they don't care what you know, they want to know that you care. Something that's always kept me grounded in my leadership journey, apart from my husband, is he has this great analogy of organizations as being like monkeys on a tree. All right. So if you're the monkey at the top of the tree, you look down and you see a group of smiling faces. If you're the monkey at the bottom of the tree, you look up and what do you see? A bunch of assholes. So, if you have that frame of reference, it really does ground you. You do need to be kind and nice to everybody. Doesn't matter from when you're having, your first interview, be nice to the receptionist because I can tell you now that they control everything. And just, it doesn't cost you to be nice and to thank people and to just actually have basic manners in the workplace. So in terms of leadership for me, my leadership is based on a very strong value set. And I have learned over the years that working in a place that doesn't align with your personal values is a very fast road to misery. It will destroy your sense of self-worth, it will destroy your happiness, and it will ultimately negatively impact your entire life. And now let's get work into perspective, right? No one on their deathbed says they wish that they worked more, right? So, you need to have your priorities right. Yes, you need to work hard when's required, but you actually need to be looking after those other things in your life. And certainly having my family around me has made that very clear to me over the years. Yes, they have made sacrifices with me being away for work, but at the same time, the life that we have managed to achieve is also obviously intricately linked with the work that I have done. Going back to the beginning, I grew up in a state house. So I had a solo mum on what was called the DPB, or the Domestic Purposes Benefit. So, we didn't have a lot. I've had a job since I was 13 years old. And we're not talking about, just like, one afternoon a week for a couple of hours. I've worked 5 days a week since then. From my year 12 and 13, so 6th and 7th form years as they were back then, I worked full-time at a company some of you might be familiar with, known as McDonald's. I did 5 night shifts a week, so after school through to midnight. One of my claim to fame is that I was the front counter person of the year for the Victoria Street McDonald's in Hamilton for 1989. I've even got a little cup to prove it. And I was also the national champion in sanitising the shake and sundae machine. So there you go. Those skills that I learned actually at McDonald's about running shifts, about customer service, about supply chains, managing logistics, etc., are all skills that I still use today, 1,000 years later. So I have always worked hard, and I do that whether I'm at work or whether I'm at home, but I always endeavour to be kind. I have very high expectations. I have very high expectations of myself, but I've also learned that you can be kind and have high expectations. One thing I've also learned is don't expect of others what you expect of yourself. When we're young, in fact, and you'll still probably believe this for a number of years, is you think that everybody is like you. But actually the reality is that not all people are like you. There's a whole range of people out there in terms of their capabilities, their knowledge, their skills, their experience, and what's going on in their lives. So understanding that and understanding how you can make the most of those people is very important both to you and to them. So back to me and my value set for leadership. So I have 5 core values that I have stuck by across the years. And the first one is honesty. Working with me, you're not going to die not knowing what I think. But likewise, I expect you to be honest with me. We are always stronger together, and we are always stronger when we know what is coming down the track. And I'm not talking about being honest when the proverbial hits the fan and things are going wrong, but this is about having open and robust conversations so that you can agree on a path forward when you both walk out the door. And you have to be on the same team when you walk out the door. You don't have conversations behind your backs. You don't have the meeting outside of the meeting. And it's all part of being on a team. One of the things about me is that my ego is not driven by being right. My ego is driven by seeing other people succeed. So I'm quite happy to listen to other information and change my mind if that is the right thing to do. It's more important to do the right thing than it is to be right. Honesty is also important because my next value is accountability. And you can't be accountable if you don't have knowledge about what's going on. So fostering an environment where people feel safe about being honest with you makes life so much easier to actually put your hand up to make the tough decisions. Being accountable as a leader is really frightening, and it's an area that we're really poor on in New Zealand. People don't like putting their heads above the parapet. Whether it's cultural, as a culture, as New Zealanders, we don't like conflict. We're more aligned with a country like Canada than we are, say, with even Australia and the US, who are more personally robust, shall I say, and have much stronger self-belief and will confront each other. Here in New Zealand, we don't like it. You can actually use that skill when you're dealing with someone whose behaviour you don't like in the workplace. Because we culturally don't like conflict, as soon as you challenge someone, they will back down and they will change. You can do that nicely. You can do everything nicely. So accountability is important to me because my next value is the importance of delivery. This has regularly got me offside with people over the years. It's amazing, really. You know, I think that, well, I firmly believe that we should be working to get things done and great things. And I would rather get 5 things done than do a lot of doing over 20 things. So achieving things is very important, but achieving things in the right way is very important to me. And in the public sector, where you are the steward of public money, it's very important to do that openly and transparently and get the right outcome. You don't want to waste things and you don't want to waste people's time. But you can't deliver without a team. Life is a team sport, work is a team sport. And for those of you that play sport, that is really setting you up well in the future. How you can coordinate people, use their skill sets to achieve literally the goal. That's essentially the skills that you need to take across into your work life. So teamwork takes us back to the beginning about leadership and my 5th value, which is the importance of people. People are at the heart of everything. I've led a lot of people over the years. My largest team was about 600 people. I have led people who swim in wastewater tanks and go down wastewater pipes for a living. I have led people who dig trenches. I have led people who write legislation and front councillors and the Prime Minister and members of Parliament. And I have led people who have built things both underground and above ground. And I've led people who have you know, arts, theatres, museums. Those people are all different. But never assume because of the role someone plays that that actually defines them. Some of the guys that dug trenches that I have worked with in the past had PhDs, but they were mentally exhausted and they were done, and actually they just wanted to spend their days on the end of a shovel. So treat everybody kindly, treat everybody with respect. Generally, you'll find that what prevents people from doing things is one of 3 factors. I've learned that people don't come to work to do a bad job. I've learned that people don't come to work to actively undermine people. Yeah, sure, there are some bad eggs out there, but you don't want to lead for the lowest common denominator. You want to lead for the greater good and for the people that are with you and will go into the trenches with you. So you need to understand what's driving them. So there are 3 key factors, and they are known as knowledge, skills, and environment. So knowledge is the things that they've learned, skills is the experience they've had, and then the environment are those factors around them. So as a leader, you can put things in place around the knowledge and skills piece to support people to learn. And there are certain factors in someone's environment, particularly in the workplace, that you can do something about. So there's a difference between what's the obligation on the person versus what's the obligation on the leader. But sometimes those environmental factors include what's going on in the home. You don't know if someone's got a sick child or a sick parent. You don't know if someone's having a breakdown. You don't know if someone's had a bad experience in a past role and they're still trying to deal with that. It's important as a leader to understand what's going on with your people. Now, if you lead 5 people, that's really easy. If you lead 10 people, it's getting a bit harder. If you lead 50 people, yep, sure, you can still know all those. Human beings are designed to have close relationships with about 150 people. So that's going right back from when we, dwelled in caves. That's what we're capable of having close connections with, and that's why we have tribes and people like me, and we come together. So That's what makes hierarchy and structure in an organisation really important, because if you're leading, say, like I did, 600 people or 1,000 people or 10,000 people, and they're not all in the same place and they're geographically diverse, is you need to rely on that power of those relationships. So you need to be able to rely on those 150 people will all have 150 relationships, and they will provide you the information that you need to understand. And being kind to people is going to get you so much further. One of the other things I've learned is that as a leader, you actually want to chase loyalty. You don't want to chase popularity. Anyone can be popular. You can make the decisions that are going to appeal to the majority. But the popular leader is not going to get done what is required to be done. Those people that are loyal, the people that are going to go into the trenches with you, they're going to like you anyway because your values align. So go after the people whose values are aligned with yours, and don't be afraid to put a stake in the sand on this is what I expect. This is the sort of people that I want to work with. This is the sort of culture. Culture trumps anything else. And you'll read about that in textbooks in the coming years, but it really does. Living and breathing culture. And culture starts at the top. As a leader, you get the culture you expect if you accept that culture. If you accept anything else, then that's what you'll get. And ladies, that applies equally outside of work, where you'll get the love we accept. So never walk past something that you need to address. So health and safety is at the core of all workplaces. You know, it used to be about physical health and safety, but these days it's about well-being. So never walk past something that's unsafe, whether that's a behaviour or whether that's something physically in the environment. As a leader, that is your most important role, is keeping people safe, their health and their physical health and their mental well-being. So you need to understand them to understand what's going on and to be able to set those expectations and to look after them. So I've talked, I think, for about 23, 25 minutes now. So I'm going to leave you with one last thing that I've learned. And that is a great Richard Branson saying, which is better to manage the whole than the asshole. Culture is what it's all about. It's about values, and it's about sharing those values with people, but it's about setting clear expectations, setting clear goals, and helping people achieve what they want to achieve. And together, you will achieve great things. Thank you very much for listening to me this morning, and I think we've got some time for some questions, if I can answer them.
I'm Sebastian Chera. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, that was Sebastian, yeah.
Were there any pivotal steps that you took in order to get to where you are now? And if so, what were they?
Sure, that's a great question, Sebastian. The key thing actually throughout my career has been relationships and building really strong relationships. So trust is not something that just materializes. Trust, particularly in a work environment, comes off the back of performance and reliable, consistent performance. I was fortunate that when I was at university, I developed a really good relationship with our head of the economics department. And when I applied for roles, when I finished university, and when I finished varsity, New Zealand was in a pretty dark place economically. We had high numbers of unemployed people. People who graduated with me, it was not uncommon for people to go through, 100 odd interviews or more before they got roles. I applied for 3 roles at the end of varsity, and I got offered all 3. And the one that I took, which was at a company called KPMG, which is one of the world's largest consulting firms, was off the back of a recommendation from the head of department. Over the years, developing relationships has actually been critical in the different roles that I've had. In fact, most of the roles I have gained have been off the back of relationships. because people will back other people they know. Goes back to the whole concept of tribe. If something is a known quantity, even if that known quantity doesn't quite fit what it is that you might be after, if you believe that that person can do it, then you will back them. So I've had the opportunity to go into different roles off the back of that. For instance, from KPMG, I went to Auckland City Treasury, and that was off the back of a relationship that I'd made within KPMG was recruiting into Auckland City Treasury. The work I did at Auckland City Treasury, when I went back to Auckland City years later, the relationships I had developed through there enabled me to get a very senior role and move on. And a number of those people that I have met over the years, I have also worked with subsequently. Over the last few years, I've done what they call consulting work, and I have worked in a lot of interesting areas. I was one of 3 reviewers in the Civil Aviation Culture Review for the Minister of Transport. I did a business case for MPI on a new plant health and environment lab, and I've done a lot of governance and operational reviews for major stadiums around the country. And at the moment, I'm the independent on the Yarrow Stadium redevelopment in New Plymouth. So it's a very long answer to your question, Sebastian, but it's about relationships, but it's also being quite deliberate about your relationships. So when I talked about leadership being important to understand people, one of the people that's most important to understand is yourself, because even if you don't become a people leader, you have to lead yourself. You have to be clear with yourself and set expectations of yourself in order for you to achieve. And people know when you're not being authentic and not being true to yourself. So it's relationships, not just with others, but also actually being open and honest with yourself, which means having some pretty ugly discussions sometimes. And it also means working and talking to people who can be honest with you and provide you feedback. One of the other approaches that I can recommend is don't take feedback on your work personally. Your work is what you do, it's not who you are. And if someone is brave enough to provide you feedback, and I talked before about how, as a nation, we endeavour to avoid conflict. If someone is brave enough to provide you feedback, try and see through the initial, what are you talking about? And actually respect the fact that that you mean enough to them for them to actually provide you that feedback and to make change as a result.
Thank you.
My name is Jack Harmon. I have a question. You talked about the culture trumps anything else. I was wondering how you boost culture in the workplace.
Sorry, how
you would boost culture in the workplace.
How I'd use culture in the workplace?
How you'd boost it.
Oh, boost. Okay, sure. I can give you an example of boosting culture. So you need people to connect with each other personally in order for them to connect at work. And building personal relationships at work results in a step change in performance. You need strong relationships because things aren't always going to go swimmingly in the workplace. And it's much easier to have tough conversations or to get through tough times when you have strong relationships. So you need to invest time and energy into people building social relationships at work as much as work relationships. An example of where I have used this is I was a senior manager at Auckland City, and when I took over the group, so our structure was we had chief executive, we had general managers, and we had group managers. We had 34 group managers, and I was one of the group managers. Every year we did a staff engagement survey. And when I took over the group, this particular group of just under 70 people, they'd been restructured and jobs changed and all sorts of things over the last 2.5 years. So they're pretty over it. So we'd just done a staff engagement survey. And out of the 34 groups, we were in the bottom 3. Now, this was a pretty pivotal group in terms of Auckland City's performance across the city. All its major projects that weren't roads sat in this group. And the following year, we were in the top 3. My chief executive rang me after that second survey and said, and whenever he rang me, it was usually because something was going wrong. So I always answered the phone with a bit of trepidation whenever I saw his name come up on the screen. And he said to me, I don't know what expletive you're doing down there, but I just carry on doing it. What I had done was pretty simple. So based on the survey results, I knew that people, you know, if they wanted greater communication from the top, that's pretty consistent. Most people rate executive communication pretty poorly. But they wanted the windows cleaned, unbelievably. A lot of people couldn't even see out of our windows, they were so grimy. And they wanted some more social time. So literally the things that I did was we purchased a table tennis table, a dartboard. We started having drinks on every couple of weeks on a Friday. That was voluntary. We did that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so it wasn't actually impinging on people's time outside of work. What we found was that people would start to come together. They'd be playing table tennis if they had a break. People, the vast majority of people came to those social gatherings because they were within work. And once a quarter, we organised a celebration and a recognition of the work that was being done. And so it's not actually that, you know, rocket science in terms of building culture. Yes, outside of that, you know, I had to set expectations for behaviour. I had to, you know, do our work priorities. We had to lose a whole bunch of things that people were working on that they loved doing, but they weren't consistent with the organisation's priorities, etc. We had to put all that sort of structure in place around it, but providing the people the opportunity to interact socially and to get to know each other as people, not as the roles they played, changed things phenomenally. And off the back of that, I have had other opportunities going forward to lead other teams and to make a difference in culture. So it's just as important how you work as what you work. I'm trusting you're all still awake. One of the things that Jacob said to me this morning as he was leaving was about some iconic Ruth Stokes sayings. My children are very used to me rolling things out. And one of them is, you can't control what other people do, but you can control how you react. That's really key for you in the workplace and as a leader. Going back to the 3 C's of clarity, consistency, and communication, is you need to be the grown-up. Just because people are grown-ups, in inverted commas, doesn't mean they're necessarily going to behave that way. And in fact, sometimes there'll be a lot of people you work with that you wish you could send them to their room. But in the workplace, you have to employ other strategies. Another key thing that I have practiced and I have also told my children is, you know, I take what I do very seriously, but myself not so much. Don't take yourself too seriously. Life is short and you're only human. And you're never going to take the human, you know, out of the workplace, out of your life. And in fact, embrace it, because human beings are fun and they're interesting. Yes, they're complicated. And yes, leading people will take more emotional energy than you ever dreamed that you would have to employ. And that is one thing is probably been my biggest learning over the years, is the amount of emotional energy I have had to invest in being a leader. If you want to be a really effective leader, it's not about your IQ, it's about your EQ. And people may not see that, and people may not appreciate that, particularly when you're making tough decisions and you're looking to lead change. But change is with us constantly. And going back to what I talked about in terms of, New Zealand Inc. and us needing to lift our productivity and doing things better, leadership is accountable for 22% of a firm's performance. And when you add that into technology, it's accountable for 45%. So almost half a firm's performance, or a school's performance, or a government department's performance is literally just down to those two factors. And we really need to lift our game if we are to be a country that everyone can afford to live in, everyone can be healthy, everyone can have a great education, and everyone can live in a home that is suitable.
I'm Alex. I was wondering, specifically earlier on in your career, how did you manage to maintain a work-life balance, like particularly raising a family and also trying to develop your career at the same time?
Work-life balance. To be fair, that's a bit of a myth. There are different times in your life where actually trying to achieve balance is going to go out the window, particularly as you move into senior roles. So rather than balance, what you need is boundaries. What you will forego and what you won't. So making sure that you're there for the first day at school and those things that matter. You're never going to remember the fact that your mum made your lunch every day for those years, but you're going to remember if your mum wasn't there at your netball game, or when you were awarded a certificate, etc. So making sure that you don't miss those things is really important. But likewise, that you're on a path for a better life. I talked to you about where I came from. So everything that we have today, no one gave it to us. We worked for it, and we have worked for it because we didn't want our children to have those same challenges. Have that leg up, and most parents do. There will always be times in your life where it is really tough, and generally you'll find that you're having children at the same time as if you do have aspirations to be in senior leadership roles, that they tend to coincide. It never rains but it pours. One of the ways that I've managed it over the years is I run. I hate running with a passion, but it's good for me, and it clears my head, and it gives me that endorphin kick for the day, and just makes me feel like, right, I'm good, I've got this. As a woman, women are generally known for suffering imposter syndrome, and particularly as a senior leader, I went through many years of thinking, right, someone's going to come through that door and say, look, I know that you're just making it up as you go along, and which was largely true, but and it wasn't until I was actually probably about 40 before I actually was able to accept, for me personally, that I'm actually really good at this stuff. And so I think in terms of your balance and looking after yourself, the idea of actually being able to achieve balance, it's more actually, I think, about doing something that you feel valued in, and then that you get value out of. You're going to beat yourself up that you're not doing anybody a good service when you're a parent and you're trying to juggle everything, but you're not alone in that. Everybody does that. So find something for yourself and make sure that you allocate time for it. So forget balance, think about boundaries.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Helena. Right here. I was wondering if you have any advice for people who want to have a career and work, but are also wanting to do something that actually helps people. So like finding a balance between working and doing something that you really feel matters as well.
Sure, work that matters. I would thoroughly recommend going into the public sector, but there are plenty of NGOs, non-government organisations, etc., that are doing fantastic work in the community. I would encourage you to find an area that you're interested in. Look, you guys are part of the generation that you probably won't even have jobs like even I have had. You know, you'll find things that interest you, and you'll be able to create businesses out of that. And you are a very values-driven generation. So I don't think that working and doing something of value are mutually exclusive. There are plenty of opportunities to get involved in our community and plenty of fantastic organisations. And again, it comes down to relationships and finding out, well, what are the areas that you are interested in, and just meeting people and talking to people and finding other people for whom you think, right, these are my people. Find your tribe, and you will be able to forge a career. If you are passionate and you work hard, then you'll be able to forge a career in an area that aligns with your values and that you're interested in. And you will find that incredibly fulfilling.
So, I don't know if you can hear me back here, Ruth, but it's Oded here. I'm curious as to where you see maybe your future. Obviously, currently CEO of Queenstown Chamber of Commerce. Quite an extensive career, since McDonald's back at the age of 15 or 16. What do you see as kind of your next steps? For yourself?
My next steps. That's a very good question, Oded. As well as working in the chamber, and one of the skills that I bring there is relationships, and relationships I have all through government, which can help our business community. I do some work outside of the chamber. One of the areas that I'm particularly passionate about is urban redevelopment. I have worked with Kāinga Ora on their construction program advisory panel previously. So the government at the moment in Auckland, Wellington, and to a lesser extent in Christchurch, is making a massive, basically a seismic shift in housing affordability in New Zealand. So we have this massive wealth transfer going on at the moment between the government and the private sector to build more affordable and higher density homes. So there are huge thousands and thousands and thousands of homes that are being developed across the country. But at the same time, it's important, you don't build communities just by building houses. You have to build places for those people to work, to shop, to come together, to congregate. And that has actually become my passion. I'm fortunate enough to also be involved in a project at the moment with Panuku, Eki Panuku, which is Development Auckland, which is Auckland Council's urban redevelopment agency. With a third party, we're looking at opportunities to accelerate urban redevelopment in parts of Auckland. So for me, I guess it's consistent with the making a difference theme and seeing things happen. The skills that I have and bringing people together to actually realise change in people's living and working environments. That's the area that I'm most passionate about, and will be a huge opportunity for New Zealand going forward. I believe that Queenstown is absolutely ripe for urban redevelopment, particularly along that Gorge Road corridor. And I'm having a number of conversations with my Chamber of Commerce hat on about how we can work together with government to actually realise some innovative construction methodologies and typologies within that area, which will actually benefit us. You know, we all know that Queenstown's an expensive place to live, and affordable housing is a huge challenge, and we still have a relatively low wage environment, given that we are largely visitor economy focused. Whilst we are diversifying nominally, the visitor economy will continue to be our largest employer for a long period of time. So it was a very long answer to your question, Oded, but urban redevelopment is next for me, and making some big differences in that, both in Auckland and hopefully here.
Thanks, Ruth, and you can see that clear alignment, like you said, with kind of your values and the things that you've been kind of doing, and the work that you've been doing kind of lead up to that. So thank you for sharing that. Any last questions, folks? Great opportunity. Okay.
Well, thank you very much for having me and listening to me this morning. And I'm always happy to talk to anybody who has any questions or wants to talk about, you know, what they're doing and maybe get another view. I've always enjoyed working with people, and my greatest satisfaction and joy is seeing people, you know, realise their potential. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
I'm Sophie, and I actually wanted to thank you for giving up your time and speaking to us on behalf of everyone. Thank you for offering your pieces of insight and all things that we can take away and develop as leaders. Something I really took away is the chasing loyalty and working with people who will go into the trenches with you and share those similar core values, which I think will be very useful to use throughout our time developing as leaders. But yeah, if we could all give a big round of applause.